Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Undercooled. Today, we're very fortunate to have Diran Apelian, who is a professor at UC Irvine. And of course, he wasn't always there. He spent a lot of time in his life at another institution, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So welcome, Diran. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what your how you got interested in material science? What was your story of why you ended up doing material science?
Well, good to see you and happy to be here. When I was a young person, meaning when I was in 15, 16, 17 years old, I was very much interested in geology and the earth and rocks. So my beginnings were really earthly, if you will. And then around 19 years old or so, I went to a visit to United States Steel Fairless Works, and I saw molten steel being poured for the first time. And boy, that was so enticing. And next thing I know, in class in math, the teacher said, Mr. Kent, that Sputnik age was the time of the, very relevant at the time, said, the future is metallurgy. That was like the graduate of plastics. Mine was metallurgy. And that was it. I applied to Carnegie, Drexel, and Yale. And I got a good offer from Drexel because I couldn't afford to go to pay a high tuition. And that worked out. That's how it all got started.
Wow. I didn't know you went to Drexel. That's great. I went to school right next to Drexel.
You went to Penn,
graduate school. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember going to some...
Bob Madden was there. So I went to Drexel as an undergraduate and then to MIT graduate school. But I have to tell you, you introduced me as a distinguished professor of material science at the University of California, Irvine. The last thing in my mind when I was in graduate school was that I'm going to be a professor. So it really was not in the plan at all. Like all things in life, it's full of inflection points and a lot of pivoting back and forth. And we don't really talk about that or even discuss it with our students that, life is not linear and you better be ready how to deal with inflection points. As long as you have your North Star, you know what's sacred to you, what your values are, and what your boundaries, what the boundary conditions are, right? What are things you're not going to do? And it works out. So I was after MIT, I did my PhD with Mert Flemings, wonderful years, 4 years. I got a wonderful position at Bethlehem Steel Corporation, no longer exists, not because of me, but because of other things. So I was there for about 5, 6 years, and I began to realize that I wasn't really enjoying it. It was just doing one job after the other. And I wanted to work on some big problems. I wanted to be in control. Not that I'm a control freak. I want to be in charge of what I'm working on. I want to own the problems I'm working on. And I didn't mind working hard. So all of the attributes of what an entrepreneur is was really beginning to ferment in my soul. And luckily, I got a call from the department head at Drexel University, where I was an undergraduate years ago. I was a pretty good student. I was top of my class, so they remembered me, I guess, or maybe they were following me. They asked me to come in and teach a course because somebody was on sabbatical. At that time, I had a girlfriend in Philadelphia, from Bethlehem. It was a 40-mile distance. So I said, this may work out, So I took a leave of absence for 1 quarter, 10 weeks. And the next thing you know, I was enjoying it immensely. I loved it. Teaching, working with the students. I didn't realize how much I had missed. Next thing I know, the dean of engineering, whom I never met, calls me in. And I remember this vividly, the days when the principal of the school calls you in because you did something bad. So what did I do? So he calls me and he says, you won the award that the students give for the best teacher. So, that has never happened with a visiting professor. So maybe you should join the faculty. And I have to tell you, in those days, the processes are nothing like it is today. So he made me an offer right there on the spot. It was a terrible offer. I mean, it was half my pay. You know, I had 6 weeks vacation at Bethlehem Steel. I had the company plane. But I took the position because, not of all those things, because I saw the potential of what could be done. And the rest is history. So I loved it. That's how I got into material science and metallurgy. That's how I got into academic world through a lot of pivoting.
You mentioned that while you were at MIT, you even took a class with Cyril Stanley Smith. And of course,
oh my God.
He's near and dear to our hearts because Larry Van Vleck, who is at Michigan forever and wrote the first textbook, that was his PhD advisor. And if I'm correct, he only had 2 students, right? Larry and Bill Mullins, right?
Exactly. Cyril Stanley Smith is a legend. I mean, he was he's so well known for the Manhattan Project and all that, but he was just a very, very special man. He didn't really like lecturing as much. In fact, he was very uncomfortable. But he loved having you come to his house, which we did often, or to his office, and just one-on-one. And we could spend an hour and a half. So I think I learned more about physical metallurgy through Cyril Stanley Smith, about surface tension, about all of the fundamental principles, grain boundaries, all this stuff, but the way he taught was very, very unusual. So Cyril Stanley Smith and Egon Orawan stand out. I mean, they were unusual teachers that inspired you but made you think. For example, Cyril would come to the class with a beautiful sphere from the Assyrian age, completely glazed with a cobalt blue glaze. And the question was, how did they do this? How did they glaze it? Well, of course they glaze it, but then they had to put it someplace for it to dry, but you don't see any marks on the sphere. How did that happen? That was like a 30-minute conversation. And finally we figured out what they had done. They had embedded all the spheres, the beads, in a sand bed. They put the glaze on top of the sand bed, melted it, infiltrated it, coated every sphere beautifully and perfectly well, and then broke the whole thing up, right? So things like that. But I did get into trouble with Mert because he called me in one day. He says, "You're taking a course in photography with Minor White, archaeology with Cyril Stanley Smith, and what the hell are you doing? This is costing me money. I got to pay for all these tuition. Work on your thesis." I said, "Mert, you're investing in my holistic education." He said, "Get out of here."
So you had a course with Minor White. Oh my God.
I did.
He's such a famous photographer.
I did. It was
That's
an amazing course.
Wow.
He took us to the Museum of Fine Arts and in front of a Rembrandt painting, and he said, "You're going to sit here for 30 minutes and just look at that painting." Oh my God, this is torture. I didn't realize that after about 6-7 minutes of looking at the same thing, you see things that you normally never see, right? So I learned a lot. All good memories, all great experiences that makes you who you are today, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, it's so important for students to hear these stories of how nonlinear the path is and how what we think we're going to do is often very different from what we actually do as time passes. So could you talk a little bit more about your professional trajectory? You found your way into academia almost by accident, and then what's happened since then in terms of you're at California now, so how did you end up in your current position?
Well, that's actually a very rich question, Tim, and I want to share it for the audience, the students or colleagues, whoever, because as you said, life is not linear. You make plans, but they never really work out. But as I said earlier, as long as you have your North Star and you know what your boundaries are, it works out. But inflection points I think of them as gifts. because they make you think whether the path you're on is what you really, really want to do. So at Drexel, here I am an assistant professor, and from MIT days, Arden Bement was a teacher, so he was head of DARPA. I had an idea of silicification completely differently, not through heat flow, but through mass flow. So bounced it off on him, had a 5-minute meeting. That's all he gave me. And we got like a $3 million contract. Now, I got to tell you, $3 million then is like, $50 million. And I'm a young assistant professor. So I had a meteoric rise at Drexel. I did really well, had wonderful students, great projects. And about 4 years later, they made me department head. And I'm a young kid. I'm like 38 years old, and did really well there. I spent about a good 12, 15 years at Drexel. And then I got recruited to go to WPI as provost, which I thought was the next step in the academic ladder, and did a really fine job in that position in restructuring the university and all that. But it was a really, really difficult position and successful. And the history will tell you that, the record will tell you that it was an incredibly successful tenure there. But I wasn't really enjoying it as much because the next thing was to be president of a university, in my own, at that time, that was the plan, right? Linear path, department head, dean. I got an offer at Bucknell University to be president, and I was a candidate there in the finalist list. And we went on a weekend vacation with my wife because I've been working so hard. And she asked me, tell me about Bucknell. What excites you about Bucknell? I said, well, I just want to show the world that I can do it. I said, that's really a good reason for us to move, huh? I realized I was doing this for all the wrong reasons. Again, pivoting. I pulled my name out and I decided to take a sabbatical to figure out what I'm going to do next. Because after provostship, it's very difficult to go back to the faculty, It's doable. I did it, but it's not the normal modality. So I took a sabbatical, but a different sabbatical. I went to industry, but not one industry, about 30 industries. Every week I went to one place. General Motors, a lot of Motel 6s in the Midwest, Harley Davidson, Mercury Marine, you name it. And I kept a journal at the time without really knowing why I was doing it. It was just to keep record of. And then when I came back, I realized this was a fertile terrain. There's so many real problems, industrial problems that require fundamental research. So I wrote a letter to these companies at that time requesting $10,000 from each of them. And 80% of them came through. That's how we started a consortium, and which is now very successful, over 30 years now, the Advanced Casting Research Center. So I got into getting funds from the industrial world for fundamental research, which again was not by design, but a lot of opportunities that come your way, but you got to grab them, right? You got to grab them. And then I was moving to either Ohio State or Minnesota, the 3M chair, Ohio State Honda chair that Jim Williams got later. And the people at WPI, the trustees, came to me and said, we don't want you to move. What are you doing? I said, well, I got to go back to I'm starting the center. You can do it here, which was music to my wife's ears because she had an orthodontic practice and she didn't want to move. So that's very long answer, unfortunately, but as you can see, a lot of things through back and forth. But today, I can tell you that I have the best job in the world. I work with some of the brightest students, some of the best colleagues in the world. Intellectually, every morning I get up, I'm excited about the things I'm working on, and it's I pitch myself, and plus having having your family, love, your tribe, people who care about you, you care about, that part of your life, and also the love of your work, those two things really make a very rich and very happy life. Yeah.
So while you were at WPI, you also got known in the educational community for a lot of work you did with project-based learning. Can you talk a little bit about how you did that? Was that while you were the provost, or
I was a provost for 7 years, but not only involved in the strategy of the university, because at that time it was more like Rose Holman. It was just engineering, 5 departments of engineering, and we restructured into physical sciences, business school, engineering. So I had to do a lot with budgeting and strategy. However, remember, I went to Drexel. Drexel is a co-op school, like Northeastern, where the undergraduate 4 years is really 5 years. First and fifth year, you're in university for 9 months, and then the middle 3 years, you work 6 months, you go to university for 6 months. However, the jobs you end up with during the co-op are not necessarily thematically related to the field. It's more about making money so you can pay the tuition, right? But it's also work experience, showing up, being accountable, getting paid. It's all good stuff, but not necessarily in your field. At the time, I had come to the conclusion that, and I still maintain that a lot of our educational journeys at our universities, especially material science and engineering, is like preparing chefs to become really, really amazing cooks. But we're doing it through cookbooks. But we never get them into the kitchen. So this theory and practice, this bridge between what you're learning and how you apply it, and why you're learning for what application and why it's important, and how that bridge that you cross both ways was missing. And WPI, we had the plan is, it's about that. It's about theory and practice, where it's about project-based learning. Now, that means different things to different people, but essentially, project-based learning 101, the inspiration and the engagement of the student is not something that the professor has to work on to develop. It comes in organically by the problem that is being stated, the fuzziness of the problem, where the student has to figure out what exactly is the problem. What is the problem we're trying to solve here, which is just huge. And having ownership to the issues and to the problem. So it's not solving somebody else's problem. Here's a homework problem you got to solve. That's the professor's homework problem, where the problem really is owned by the students. And then developing a methodology, solutions. So we do this in the first year, second year, third year, fourth year of the undergraduate years. First year is more about general great problems of the world, whether it's health, food, recycling, materials, world hunger, things of that sort. Big issues. But what it does, it teaches the students that they don't know anything yet. That for them to solve these problems, they got to learn all the tools that they need to be able to succeed. And second year is more in the humanities. Third year is about social sciences and engineering. Social sciences is really, if physics was the main science in the 20th century, I think social science is for the 21st century. So we have these international project centers where students go at different locations with other students from other countries. So it's multicultural, humbling to some extent, but that's how you learn. And the senior year is more like the traditional senior thesis. So that's what we did at WPI, and really worked on enhancing it, making it better and better. And actually, we won the National Academy's Gordon Prize in 2016 for that. Yeah. Hopefully that answers your question.
I love the idea of doing more with social sciences with our engineering students. I can just see they would benefit so much from learning more about economics, sociology, political science. I mean, these fields are going to overlap very strongly with the large engineering problems of the 21st century. It's not purely technical at this point.
Well, I mean, the role of policy, the importance of policy, governmental policies, the policies of the land, the policies of your county you live in, the state, are so critical. It's not just technical solutions. And we can come up with technical solutions, but it can be eradicated and completely mitigated with the policies that are developed by the people. So engineering students really need to be advocates, really advocates. I mean, you can't just leave it for the lawyers to figure this out. We gotta influence those, but learn about it as well. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Tim. It's so critical. A lot of students today are, especially this young generation, for good reason, with climate change, they're so interested in making the world a better place, climate issues, making the planet safe, better place, environmentally issues. They're really engaged with that. And at times it's a revelation to them that the technical issues is not the only thing they need to focus on. That policy is just as important, if not sometimes more important, where one policy decision can influence a lot of different things, Imagine for a second if the law of the land, federal government law, not by state, that any manufacturer that makes something at the end of life, they have to take that back and disassemble.
Cool.
And figure out how to recover and reuse those materials, all the companies will fight that to death. But imagine if that was the law. It would change everything, right? It would change everything.
So I understand that at Irvine, you're now teaching a very interesting course that seems a little related to this, about essential skills in professional life. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think it's a really important question, and I'm glad you asked. When I came to Irvine, they really didn't recruit me here to teach courses. They said, we want you to bring in the industrial engagement, the Advanced Casting Research Center, and at the time we were talking to Pratt Whitney. So now we have a Pratt Whitney Center of Excellence here. But there's, at the University of California system, you got to teach. I said, I love teaching. That's not an issue. But, all the courses are pretty much spoken for. Why don't you look at the curriculum and figure out what's missing, and then you can develop your own course. I said, wonderful. That usually doesn't happen, right? They say, well, Steve, you got to teach thermo next term. We need that. Or, So this was an opportunity. And when I looked at the curriculum, what was missing, there were three things that were missing. One was how things are made. Students are learning all about Fermi, energy, quantum, what the electrons do, and optoelectronics, all this stuff. But no idea about what ores are, where they come from, electrometallurgy, hydrometallurgy. So I developed a course on materials processing from the liquid state, solid state, vapor phase, and suspensions. And then the other course, which is the one you're referring to, is essential skills to succeed in professional life. Now, I can't take credit for that. I sit on a board, and one of the CEOs of a major U.S. corporation, when he was retiring, he gave a dinner talk about lessons learned that he learned as he was retiring. I said, I wish somebody told me these things when I was 19 or 20. So that's how it all came into being. So the course is about, the first 2 weeks is devoted to what does it mean to be professional? Professional habits, traits, things that you have to work on. And we bring in renowned speakers from National Academy, chief scientists who are humble and can be vulnerable in front of an audience and share with the students all the failures and things that they've learned they wish. So it's really giving back and teaching them what they should be aware of and cognizant and work on. The next week is about pivoting and planning, some things we already talked about. The next following week is on leadership, and we're bringing a couple of CEOs who are extraordinary storytellers that really talk about that as a leader, you can't just be a leader. You have to develop trust with your people. You have to have confidence, which means preparation and homework and really doing your work, and respect and dignity. People who are way below you, people way above you, treat everybody. So things of that sort. Then we have 2 weeks of communication skills with a Hollywood drama coach, who teaches you storytelling, scripting, how do you I'm not doing any of it right now in this podcast, so I would fail the course. Posture, how you got to stand up, never sit down as I am, all these things. And then we do another 10 days on business acumen. How do you read an annual report, and what do you look for? This week we're doing how do you do interviews? How do you ask rich questions? Then we spend a week on life balance. So it's all things that are, we hope that through ether or through osmosis the students are going to develop or have. But it's a very popular course. There's a wait list for it, and I'm having a ball teaching. I'm not really teaching. I'm more of a facilitator of the learning environment. And the homeworks are a journal entry. So engineering students doing a journal entry, 5, 6, 7 pages long every week. Unfortunately, I have to read them. It's all in confidence, one-on-one. But I think it's an important part of, especially in today's very fast-paced world, to have time to contemplate, to have time to reflect, and chart your way, Yeah. So it's a cool course.
Yeah, 2 things there that you said that I really appreciate. The first is that I was fortunate enough to take a similar course as an undergraduate in physics, which was a professional skills course, but it was much more focused on communication and writing, presenting, interviewing, how to apply for jobs, that sort of thing, which was very helpful. But it didn't really teach us more of the direct interpersonal skills of how to build a relationship with someone, how to tell your story in a way that anyone can relate to. And I'm really happy to hear that this is part of the course that you've orchestrated, because I realized years later that was a serious deficit that I had to figure out. And if I had been able to learn it formally, it would have made grad school a lot easier, for sure.
At least exposed to it, right? At least you're exposed to it, so you can develop your own path as to how you're going to do that. One of the things we also talk about is, how do you develop mentors in your life? You want to have a personal mentor, but you also want to have this imaginary mentor, which is a collage of a whole bunch of people. Steve is a great storyteller. I could talk to Steve about anything at the deli. We could probably talk for 3 hours, right? About a subject. So that's something I love about him. So that's one aspect. I want to be like Steve, like that. Then I have another individual who is really a great orator, the way they give a speech. Obama comes to mind, a great speech. He really is a great orator. Then I have another person who is terrific at organizational skills, how they manage the room and walk the room. They walk in the room. So I try to learn from all these people, unconsciously or subconsciously, and try to put all these together. That becomes your imaginary mentor, right? So we talk about all these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing in there that you said that I think is really valuable is that your role in the course is to be a facilitator. Yeah. It's not showing up and giving lectures. That's not really what the students need. They need an environment where they're able to ask hard questions and to try to find answers to those questions themselves, to develop their own ability to think and to learn. And I feel that as time goes on and technology gets ever more intrusive, the value of just being able to provide someone information is decreasing more and more as time goes on.
Yeah.
And our role as teachers really needs to be able to engage with our students as human beings and give them support and give them experiences, not to provide them information. They can get information anywhere at this point.
Especially in this day and age with the Google and artificial intelligence, there's a lot of information, but the wisdom and the ability to interact with people, artificial intelligence cannot love, but how you relate to people, the eye contact, the empathy, how to be vulnerable with each other and learn from each other. Those are things that are not LinkedIn or Instagram methodologies. Those are real, individual relationships, which really are one of the most important ways that brings joy to one's life, right? There are several factors, but that's one of them, right? I talked about your family, love, and all that in your life, and also your work. But having enjoyment in life where you don't feel that you're alone, right? That you got people that you can relate with. For me, I have an unhappy week if I don't go out to dinner with a couple of friends and have at least a couple of times a week go out and have a dinner conversation for a few hours, Anyway, we're getting off tangent, but important.
Well, it's really interesting that you bring in a Hollywood coach, a drama coach or whatever. It just, the whole idea of teaching students how to tell stories is such a powerful and important thing. And, you've probably read this book, but have you heard of this woman, Nancy Duarte?
Of course.
So her book, Resonate.
I have it.
What an amazing book. And, when students give, how often do you go to a professional conference and hear people stand up and give horrible talks where they talk all about how hard they worked to collect this data? And nobody cares about that, right? They come into your talk because they want something. And wow, what Nancy Duarte writes about in her book. And of course she uses Hollywood as that's the group that has elevated the science of storytelling to the highest levels.
Yeah.
And the idea that, her chapter on who's the hero is so fantastic.
Yeah.
And it always blows students away when you explain that you're not the hero. The hero is not the one giving the talk. The hero is all the people sitting in the room. And your job is to give them a magical gift, because they walk into your room and they think the world's fine. They don't know there's a problem. So you have to be the Obi-Wan Kenobi and explain to them
Exactly.
there's a problem in the universe. And then you have to give them a magical gift like the Force. But what's that gift? That gift is your data that you collected and your models and interpretation, so they can go on the epic journey and finish.
Exactly right. I want to go back to Tim for a minute. I'll come back to you, Steve. So, Tim, my business card when they came to University of California, Irvine, it has this fancy title, Distinguished Professor of Material Science and Engineering. I had it reprinted, so it has my name, and underneath I have facilitator of the learning environment, coach, innovator. That's it. Those are three things I do. Now, about presentations, there are many takeaways, but some of the important ones that really stand out at the apex, is that when you give a presentation, what you want to aim for, not always succeed, but at least aim for, that when you're done, people say, oh my God, it's too bad it's finished. This was so good. I want more of it. How many technical presentations you've sat through where you couldn't wait for the damn thing to be over?
Right.
Because they're so boring. And the reason they're boring is because they never tell you why they're doing this. Who's going to benefit from it? What's the problem they're going after? There's no context. There's, none of this is built up. This is what I did. And, anyway, we're getting off tangent here, but this idea of putting data up without even explaining what the coordinates are and what the units are. I usually present the data without any data. I just put the coordinates. And actually, what do you think is good or what thing is bad? Where is it going to go up? People actually get engaged. And it's an art, but it's certainly learnable. You can learn this. It's nobody, and everybody has their own style. Not everybody's going to be a great orator. And some people have an accent, some people speak differently, but it works as long as you do those fundamental things where you engage the audience, you make it compelling, and less is more, right? Less is more, yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
what are you actually doing with research these days? You said you moved this whole processing center, and you have the. So, what gets you up every morning when you think about the science and the research that you're doing?
A lot of things, but my research portfolio today is really in four areas. One of them is the Advanced Casting Research Center, which is the consortium. We have 42 corporations and 42 enterprises, because some are not corporations. They're like a Livermore or Sandia. All of it is to advance manufacturing, not just metal casting, not what Rich Flynn and those guys at Michigan did, or Wisconsin, but rather digital manufacturing, how to make things from the liquid state. Okay. The second area, not in any hierarchical order, is additive manufacturing, and we're working not on the small footprint and low deposition rate, but large footprint and large deposition rate processes. Wire arc additive. Of course, we do laser powder bed fusion with powder. Wire arc additive and cold spray are the two technologies. We have those machinery equipment here and a lot of projects with a variety of different agencies. And we're trying to transform that industry, if you will, by not using any powder or wire, but rather taking liquid metal directly and bringing it down to the thixotropic two-phase range, break up the dendritic network, create essentially a colloidal suspension emulsion, and print that, digitally, robotically. Very much like this, this pen that I have, which is a gel. What comes out of that is not ink. It's not liquid. It's a gel. It's an emulsion. So that's what we're doing in that. That's very exciting. It's a very difficult problem. You got to control viscosity, non-Newtonian, thixotropic, very much shear rate dependent. It's an engineering nightmare, but that's what's exciting, right? The third area is very, very nascent area, high entropy alloys, complex concentrated alloys for a variety of really interesting applications. Fusion, for example. Most of these are refractory elements, niobium, tantalum, titanium, tungsten, or in the face center cubic, chromium, cobalt, nickel. So these are not things that melt at low temperatures. They're highly oxidizing. So the processing of these is what we're working on. It's a MERSEC, it's a National Science Foundation MERSEC, and I'm leading the processing group there. And the last one is not last but not least. As I said, they're not in any hierarchical order. Is the Pratt & Whitney Center of Excellence. So if you think about it, the Advanced Casting Research Center, about $1.5 million a year on an annual basis. Pratt & Whitney Center, about $1.5 million a year. So about $3 million out of the $5 million a year comes from industry. So 60% of my portfolio is from industry. So, and I enjoy that because they really hold you accountable. Industry is wonderful, but for them to give you money every year, year after year, they want to see some return on their investment. You know. So those are the technological areas that we're excited about. Gigacasting, for example, in the ACRC, making these large, I'm talking about 10 feet long castings, right? All in one shot, liquid metal coming in, and you got to control the dendro arm spacing across the whole thing at 15, 20 micron. Thermal management, stuff like that.
Wow. Sounds exciting.
Yeah,
So
I
for
remember.
the students, 1 second, Tim. For the students who are listening, material science, even if you don't give you tenure, you have tenure. There's so many problems to be solved. You have job security for life. so it's a very rich area. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tim.
Oh, I was just remembering, I think it was at TMS last year, seeing one of these huge castings. It was like an entire automotive underbody, just a single piece. And I'm looking at this like, I'm not sure I believe this. There's got to be a weld somewhere in here, right? Like I'm inspecting the thing on the trade floor, just not quite believing it. But, it's just an amazing testament to when you get a lot of smart people working together on a problem, you can do some really amazing stuff. And that, not just practical utility, but the joy of teamwork is something that we really need to get our students to believe in early on in their careers, because that's how they'll be successful.
Teamwork is the key. And actually, I was remiss in emphasizing that when Steve asked me about project-based learning. Project-based learning is through teams. It's not individual work. Because in a team, everybody's a leader, right? Everybody has to be a leader. Everybody has to have room and space to speak, participate, and contribute. So, and the sooner you learn that, the better off you're going to be, Some of the worst leaders I've ever met are the people who go in a room and before you know it, there's no more oxygen left, Where's the oxygen tank? So, yeah, teamwork is... But, Steve and I had a conversation, nothing to do with this, on grading. And I did buy the book, by the way. Imagine if grading was done in such a way that you tell to the 4 or 5 students who are working on a project, you say, your grade is going to be the grade of the lowest performing person on this team. So if you have 4 people, A, B, C, D, and D gets an F, the rest of you are going to get an A. No, your grade's going to be an F. And when you think that way, when your paradigm is changed and say, oh my God, I got to lift everybody up. If that person is not doing that well, I got to help them out to make sure that, or organize. What are you good at? What don't I do well? Maybe I should focus on the things I'm really good at, and you do. So that's how the team wins. And the sooner people learn that, the better, right?
Yeah. I know in team dynamics
the,
with students, it's really a challenge because they are all good at something, and many of them haven't quite figured out what that something is yet. But I can say to them genuinely in good faith, look, you made it to the University of Michigan in our case. You're obviously good at something. You wouldn't have made it this far if you didn't have an aptitude, a valuable skill, a passion that you're able to bring to this project. Maybe you have to figure out what it is. Maybe that's the real purpose of this project from a teaching point of view. But you do have one. And then just as you're saying, Diran, of having them work in their teams to discover for each of them what that is and how they can fit together those pieces of the puzzle to succeed as a group.
That's where the facilitation comes in, because they need encouragement. Remember when you were 19? Come on.
I was terrible at everything.
It was a long time. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about being able to expose yourself. You know, you're just trying to become, this young adult. You want to profile yourself as being successful. You just got into the University of Michigan, and all your relatives and your parents are so proud of you, and you're a bastion of success. And you're gonna sit down with a bunch of other colleagues in your group, in your class, and say, I'm really terrible at this, and I'm not good at that, but I'm good. Being able to talk like that and be open for the sake of what's good for the tribe, what's good for the team, is not natural, not at that age. So they need a lot of encouragement, and they need a lot of case studies and just facilitation. That's how we win. That's how we win. And the metaphor is really, soccer. If you look at soccer teams, if you follow soccer, the ones that really do well are really the teamwork. It's not the ones that have one star, the big ego, but everybody pulling together, Yeah.
That's why I show all my team-based classes a picture of the tunnel going out to the field at Michigan Stadium that Bo Schembechler painted on the wall. As they run out, it says, the team, the team, the team.
Right.
Because that's all that matters. Right. If you want to win a football game, you better do it as a team.
And the other thing is that, did you watch the Knicks and Celtics game by any chance?
No.
The Celtics were poised to win, but they lost. The Knicks, New York, haven't won in, 20, 25 years, and they won. At the end of the game, the losers and the winners hugged each other. They hugged each other. Respect for the loser and respect for the winner. And, we need a lot more of that in this world. We really do,
Absolutely.
Yeah. You actually see that in chess players a lot. Chess players have a lot of respect for each other. They work like hell for 6 hours to win that game. But the guy who loses it, there's a lot of empathy by the winner for the person. Yeah. Anyway. How we doing? How we doing here on this podcast?
We're doing great.
Good.
We're about
Good.
50 minutes in, and so
Oh my goodness.
maybe you can tell us what's next for you.
Oh my God. If I can continue on this journey that I'm on now, which has been so satisfying, these 4 centers that we have here, there's 4 activities at the University of California, Irvine, teaching this course. So professionally, I assume you're asking me professionally.
And with teaching.
I would like, if I can, scale up this course on essential skills. Actually, I'm working on it right now. I'm doing an experiment where we're videotaping all of these, but I don't know if it's going to work, because the dynamics of the classroom engagement, where you have a lot of Q&A, is really key. So there's some things that you cannot scale. So that's where I'm at right now. If I can take this course, Essential Skills for Professional Life, and scale that so that we can have it in every curriculum in every university in engineering, that'd be a wonderful thing. I think it will help and benefit a lot of the next generation. The other thing, Steve, which we really haven't talked about, is influencing some changes in the curriculum. More project-based learning, more teamwork. We already talked about that. But also a more holistic approach about material science engineering from the world of materials. Where do materials come from? Where do they end up? So I know it doesn't sound very modern, but some of the principles of extractive metallurgy, meaning pyro, electro, hydro, are all the same processes we need for sustainability, for recovery and resource recycling. So if we could include or immerse, bring into the curriculum where the materials come from and how they're made, and also at the end of life, after manufacture, use, how they can be recovered and reused, I think will be really important. So those are the things that I'm excited about, and I'm obviously thinking about and working on it. But those are the things that would be next. They're not here yet, but that's on the canvas, if I will put it that way. You're born with an empty canvas, and throughout your life you got to fill that canvas with your brush and your paint, right? So I'm working on that.
That's great. I think the only way to scale things with teamwork is take advantage of all those breakout rooms that Zoom introduced us to. Those are powerful things, that even if people are all across the planet, if you have enough breakout rooms, you make it an intimate experience where you actually have a team, even if you're not in the same place. So I think that's the technological solution to that little part of it. And the hard part is monitoring all that as you scale it. That's pretty hard to do, because you can only be one place at a time.
Yeah. But you could have a lot of what's the word? Not disciples, but the teacher teaching the teacher teaching the teacher. So
right. Yeah, I do this in my team-based classes. I bring in instructional aides, which are undergrads who just took the course, and I don't have to pay them that much money. And it's actually kind of cool for them because it's the first time they're getting paid for what they just learned. Right? We're valuing what they learned in the previous course, but they're so close to age to the students I'm teaching that it's a totally different dynamic. Yeah. And so I'm able to have, one undergrad working with two teams of 4 to 6 people per team.
Well, learning
and that's
from
a
each
lot
other.
of mentorship.
Learning from each other, right? We learn from each other. I learn from you. You learn from me. Applies also to peer learning, right? Peer learning is extremely powerful, where a junior student in undergrad is the peer learner for a freshman or a sophomore, because they look up to each other, right?
Well, and it's hard baked into our DNA. I'm teaching this impact of materials on society course that Kevin Jones down in Florida pioneered. My version is I'm working with an archaeologist, and it's 3 million years of how materials impact culture.
Yeah.
And I never really appreciated that, writing is only 10,000 years old, but humans have been around for 3 million years. So you need a log plot to even display that, right?
Exactly.
And 10,000 is nothing. But how did we learn before there was writing? We learned by social interaction. We learned by storytelling.
Right.
We learned by peer learning, right? And 3 million years is enough to hard bake it into our DNA. This is one of our primal skills as humans. And so the better we can tap into that, the more powerful we're going to be as a whole culture.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about the role of music, literature, we call it literature, but poetry, storytelling.
Yeah.
But you have to remember, in those days, I wasn't around then, but I can only imagine. In those days, there was no electricity, right?
No.
So there were long nights. There was a lot of time to reflect, to contemplate, to imagine.
Yeah.
And imagining takes time, you know. Some of the best times I have is when I travel long distance for 6-7 hours where I don't do anything except think and reflect. Yeah. So there was a lot of time. There was no electricity. There were no candles. You know, like 12, 14 hours of darkness.
Yeah.
That's why
while you're hungry, cold, and fearful, some animal is going to come eat you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, the importance of time is just something I really hope we can convey to our students, because their generation has been so encultured to the idea that you always have to be doing something, you always have to be productive, that you have to do more because more is more. And if they're not always generating things, then I don't know. I don't really get the value system. It's so important to just do nothing sometimes. And I'm not even talking about recreation necessarily, but just as you're describing, just sit there and think. Actually be comfortable in your own brain. Process your emotions. Think about experiences that you've had. Try to make sense of it.
Yeah.
That's something that you can't do if you're so busy trying to be productive. And I hope that that's something that we can somehow inspire our students to be a little bit more comfortable with just being in their own minds.
I try to do that myself, but the irony is that, you know, I see a lot of my colleagues, and I'm sure you see that Michigan, they don't take elevators, right? They take elevators and they don't take the stairs, and then they go to the gym and get on the Stairmaster. And some people are so busy being busy. And what they need, and then what they do is they go into meditation, wellness programs. You got to balance it. It's not on the spectrum. It's not from one to the other. You got to balance it. So, taking some time off is like charging your batteries, right? You can't. You need time off to just think, or doodle, or journal. I think journaling is very powerful. You know. Reflecting and writing it down. Because it's one thing thinking about things, but there's something magical happens when you take paper and pen, and there's a crystallization process, if you will, a silicification term that occurs, and you know, it nucleates, it grows, and takes shape. Yeah.
Right.
Metaphorically speaking here.
Yeah. And it forces you to slow down.
We always tell our students that, you know, writing is part of thinking. You know, how many times do you think, you know, you go do an experiment, you look at all your data, you think you have it all figured out. Then you go try to write it up to write a paper, and you're going like, uh-oh. It's very important to really reflect on what it all means. And when you can learn how to express that in a paper, it usually reveals all of what was lacking in your thinking and helps you think much better. So, you know, writing is a really critical part of thinking.
Yeah, and what prefaces that is also reading.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to make a general statement because I don't have the data, but I have a fear that students today are not reading as much, perhaps, as my generation.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and so sometimes I ask to the class, how many of you have read the letters of Seneca or Meditations by Marcus Aurelius? You know, you would think that you would have had that in humanities course or somewhere along your education.
Right.
And when they have no idea what I'm talking about, you know, or Plato or whatever, Republic. Important readings that also teaches you the syntax, right? Syntax of the language.
Mm-hmm.
So when I came to America at the age of 15, I came from overseas. I didn't know English. I knew French, I knew Italian, Armenian, because of Armenian parentage, and we had lived in Lebanon. I picked up a little bit of Arabic, but my English was really what I had learned from a Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin movie, And the way I learned it quickly is reading a lot of text. I didn't start with Faulkner, but Hemingway, and just dissecting the sentences, the syntax, and it teaches you the melody and the harmony of the language, and any words you don't know, go up and look up in the dictionary, But reading is really important.
I agree.
Yeah, terrific.
Well, we're about at time. So before we leave, is there anything else you'd like to mention? Any words of wisdom you can leave us with, or anything exciting you haven't told us about you'd like to let people know about?
Well, first I want to thank you for making this as fun and enjoyable as it has been to talk about these things. And I hope the audience, that especially the students, the next generation who will listen to this, what I hope they will take from it is that there are lots of opportunities out there waiting for you to grab. To some extent, try to figure out what is that you really want to accomplish in this life, because it is a life, short or long, we have no control. But at the end of it, what is that you want to have accomplished, and make that your target. And just like you do in your GPS in your car, your destination point, right, as to where you want to go. There are many various ways to get there. You can take a toll road, you can take a bridge, whatever, but you know where you're heading. So I think knowing yourself and knowing where you're heading, and the rest will take care of itself. But within material science and engineering, lots of opportunities, and it is essential to all of the grand problems of our society, whether it's healthcare, whether it's food shortage, whether it's shelter, mobility, energy. We need materials and material science as a enabler to all of these various issues that we have to deal with. So it's very rich, and it should be a wonderful journey. Again, I want to thank you for the opportunity, and it's been fun. And you guys have a great day.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. You have absolutely become part of my composite mentor. I can tell you that. So thank you so much. I've learned a lot. And thank you all for listening out there. And
that's the best compliment you could have. That's the best compliment you could have given me, Steve. And Tim, nice talking to you as well.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show. To the audience, we'll see you next time.
See you later on. Bye.
Bye-bye.